All right, before you begin filling in your page of doodle notes, please make sure that you set up your page in your journal. Once your notes are finished, it'll just be glued flat onto this page, page 28, and we are looking at types of heat transfer. Now the first section we're going to look at in the top right corner of the doodle notes, radiation. Hopefully you remember a lot of this stuff from middle school or even elementary school if you can think back that far. So radiation is when heat is moving between objects that are not touching. And you typically will get radiation. The most common thing that we think of is from the sun. But you also can get radiation heat from things like a fire. Now, when you hold a marshmallow over a fire, most of the time, some of us like to touch it in the fire, but most of the time your marshmallow is held over the fire, and so what you have is just heat that's rising up from the fire itself. It's actually sending these waves of energy up through to heat the marshmallow. Our next type of heat transfer on the left side of your paper in the middle, convection. Convection is when we have heat that is circulating through fluids. Now, fluids a lot of people think is just water or liquids or things like that, but fluids actually include things like air and water. So gases and liquids are both fluids. Now, what direction does heat circulate through those fluids? Well, we know that hot air is actually lighter if you think back to chemistry. And so hot air will go up, and then as the hot air goes up, the cooler air, which is heavier, gets pushed down. Typically in convection, you have a heat source at the bottom, so this cool air that gets pushed down is then heated by the heat source, it becomes warmer, and it goes up, and that's where you get the circulation, that constant motion of the fluids. And remember from yesterday, we know that heat always moves from a hotter to a cooler region. Okay? Never from cold to hot, always from hot to cold. The last type of heat transfer down on the bottom right of your paper is conduction. Okay? Conduction is when heat moves through an object from direct contact. You're actually touching it. So our example here, we have our burner, our stove burner. The pot itself is physically touching the burner, and so the pot gets hot. The hotter the pot gets, the handle, if you've got a metal handle, that gets hot as well, and that's why we do things like using oven mitts to pick up pots and pans and cookie sheets and things like that from the stove and from the oven. Anytime you touch something and it feels hot, that's conduction. Now let's look at the examples in the bottom left corner. We have 4 examples, and hopefully these should be pretty self-explanatory. Hopefully you'll know what they are right away, but let's go through them just in case. So the very first thing, walking on hot sand. Walking on it, there's your first clue. Your feet are in contact with the sand, so that's conduction. Your feet feel hot because they're actually touching the hot sand. The second one over here, touching a hot coffee mug. Again, your key word there, touching. So we know that's conduction as well. Your hand gets warm because you're physically in contact with the hot mug. The mug itself is hot because it is physically in contact with the hot coffee inside. The next example, the sun warms the earth. Now, the sun is not in contact with the earth. There's no fluids that are circulating back and forth. So we know that the sun is warming things because of radiation. It's actually sending out rays of energy to heat the earth. Our last example is currents in the Earth's magma. Now, if you think back to science classes that you may have taken in middle or even elementary school, the Earth's mantle is filled with hot magma, which is the fluid, not quite a liquid, not quite a solid. It's the fluid that comes out of volcanoes as lava. So the currents, the magma itself is actually swirling around and around and around and around inside the mantle. And so we have that moving of fluid, which is convection. So here we have several examples of the different types of heat transfer. Now, with the rest of your class time, you've got 3 more boxes for examples. There's one at the very, very top, and then 2 more at the very bottom. Space for you to add examples of conduction, convection, radiation. Pick one of those empty boxes for a conduction example, one of those boxes for convection, and one of those boxes for radiation. Once you've completed your examples, go back in and color your pictures. Add some details to the pictures. Add some smoke lines coming off of the fire, or something that shows that the pan is getting hot. Color in all the blanks and just make your notes look really nice. I will be grading them tomorrow, as well as your laws of thermodynamics foldable. So use your time wisely today. We will look more at some laws of thermodynamics and how they affect the types of heat transfer, and then what we can do with that tomorrow and then for the rest of the week. So good luck, and make your notes look nice.